Lincoln County Planning Commission. Got a thing to read here, so bear with me. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. The order of events tonight will be as follows. For each public hearing, staff will introduce an agenda item and present a summary of the staff report. The applicant will then be asked to explain their proposal in further detail and to answer any question from the Planning Commission members. I will then open the floor to public comment. First, the persons in support of the application, and then persons in opposition of the application. When you come up to the podium, please state your name, address, and speak clearly into the microphone. Speakers are encouraged to address only new and relevant information pertaining to the item. Above all, please be cordial to all meeting participants and refrain from side conversations and speaking out of turn, or you'll be asked to leave. Lastly, decisions on conditional use permit applications may be appealed by submitting a letter to the County Planning and Zoning Office within 5 business days. All right. With that, we will do roll call. Commissioner Scott.
Here.
Commissioner Hogan.
Here.
Commissioner Enstead.
Here.
And Commissioner Jungling's here. All right, next, approval of the meeting minutes. We've all had those submitted to us. Is there any changes or discussion? Mr. Brown, any changes to the minutes today?
No changes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. With that, I'll ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve. Scott?
I'll second.
All right, motion is second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call. Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner. What was that? Did I hear something? Huh. Commissioner Hogan.
Yes.
Commissioner Enstead.
Yes.
And Commissioner Jongley is a yes. All right. Agenda. That's what happened. All right, agenda. Any changes on the agenda tonight?
No changes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, with that, I'll ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll do roll call. Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan.
Yes.
Commissioner Enstead.
Yes.
And Commissioner Jungling is also a yes. All right, at this time, I'll ask for public input on anything not related to anything on the agenda tonight. So if you have any concerns or anything you want to let us know about, feel free to step up and speak with us. Seeing none, I will close the floor. Old business. Do we have any old, oh, okay, here we go. Mr. Brown?
No old business,
Oh, all right, thank you. And then, public hearings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commissioners. This first application is an application from Grand Valley Properties LLC. The application is a rezoning application. The application is proposing to rezone a approximately 6.77 acre parcel from the A1 Agricultural District to the I1 Light Industrial District. I'll pull up in there. The subject property is identified in this here, but it does also include this piece right here. The property was recently replatted to include this parcel and essentially this parcel here. The property just to the north of this was rezoned, I believe, in the early 2000s to I1 Light Industrial. And the purpose of that, this property is owned by Grand Valley Properties as well, and is utilized for Dakota Steel is the business that occupies that property. From my understanding, there was not a concept plan submitted with the application, but in discussions with the applicant intends to build a structure, I believe, somewhere on this part of the property here, which will be utilized for essentially warehousing for materials that are associated with their business to the north. There is 2 residential properties that are adjacent to this subject property for the rezone. Both of those properties are also owned by Grand Valley Properties LLC. Comprehensive plan, as I noted in the staff analysis in the staff report, comprehensive plan identifies this as future agricultural. However, the text within the comprehensive plan does identify areas in the agricultural area that can be utilized if they're involved with agricultural operations for commercial or light industrial type uses. As part of staff analysis, though, we did take a look at the comprehensive plan and we did take a look at the surrounding area. As noted, subject property and all surrounding property is identified for future agricultural purposes. However, because the Board of Commissioners or the county has rezoned this property in the early 2000s, staff feels that this change would be in conformance with that existing zoning, and so therefore did recommend approval of the application. Staff did post a property for this public hearing, and the applicant did send out letters within 500 feet of the property notifying those property owners of this public hearing tonight. As of this meeting, I did have one call this afternoon in regards to, and I'm unclear if I did explain to them what the proposed rezoning was for. They did ask that it be tabled, I guess. I didn't expand upon that, I guess, but I did ask that they send an email, which I did not receive prior to this meeting. So with that, I guess if you have any other questions for staff, I'd be glad to answer any that you have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff on this property?
Toby, can you say who the call was from and what their objection was?
I didn't get the name of who it
Okay.
was, yeah.
And what was their reason for wanting to table it?
I think that they didn't know what the application was for.
Okay.
So I did explain to them as well as that, as you guys know, tonight is just, you're considering a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. So there will be another public hearing in a time before the action is completed.
All right, Commissioners, any further questions for Mr. Brown? I got a question, couple, Toby. The properties across the gravel road to the west, what are those? Are those residences or what's there?
These properties here,
Yeah,
these are also owned, I believe this is Mr. Decker who will be testifying on behalf of the application. I believe he lives in this property here.
then, it shows the creek going through the middle there. I know this is past, I mean, this was years ago, but how'd that ever work out? They
So, the applicant did work, and this was before my time, but he did work with the floodplain administrator for Lincoln County, and I believe that they actually rerouted this to, I believe, down around here. And there was paperwork that was submitted to FEMA to change essentially the flood mapping for that particular property.
So with that, I assume the next addition supposedly in the future probably will not be attached. It'll be a separate standalone building, I assume. I know they did not provide a concept plan, but
Yeah, my understanding is that, yeah, the building will not be attached. It will be solely on the other property, and then, I don't believe they'll get access across that property.
all right. Commissioners, any further questions? All right, hearing none, I will ask the applicant to come forward and talk about their application.
Good evening. My name is Leonard Decker. I'm at 29007 477th Avenue, Kenton, South Dakota. And the reason I want to rezone is I need a building for my maintenance, for my business, and some storage. And that's the main reason.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Will this affect the traffic at all, coming to and from the facility?
It shouldn't change the traffic flow. There's a driveway in between the two houses, which is the residential driveway. And the reason we plotted the south smaller plot, we want to rezone that because it does have a driveway into that area, so it would have a separate driveway. That's the main reason for doing that, to separate it from residential.
So that driveway go on the very south end of that property, but the very north end of the bigger one.
The driveway is all the way to the south to that small building that you see, coming in and around the building, heading up north.
And those other two properties which you own, are those still zone residential or ag?
They're residential, yeah.
Okay. Commissioners, any further questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, I would ask anybody in favor of the application to come forward and speak. All right, seeing none, I will ask anybody in opposition of the application to come forward.
I'm kind of in the middle. I'm Anthony James Ventura, 47763, 292nd Street, Hudson, South Dakota, 57034. One, without a development plan in an industrial area, poor planning makes poor decisions. When you don't know what's being built and you don't know what the neighbors are going to do adjacent, it's a dangerous decision. Part of industrial is trees, berms, drainage, how to pave, traffic, things like that. And so like I said, they're my neighbors. I'm not trying to pick on them. But once again, my other neighbors are calling me saying, you know, I got to see these lights all the time. Why aren't these lights shielded? What's going here? What are they going to do? And so once again, there's no master plan. It's just, we'll build something, we'll give you the details later. You have the cart in front of the horse. So what I would recommend is either table this for 30 days and let the residents come talk, or vote it dead. Because this little industrial thing, if you blow up the map, you have miles of agricultural around this one little pothole zoning that Lincoln County allowed years ago, which never should have been allowed. And so once again, when are we going to start following the rules you have in place? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anybody else in opposition of the application? All right, seeing none, I will close the floor to public comment, and I'll ask the commissioners for get this going. For a motion. That's what, whew.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna make a motion to table because I've got a list of things here that I think need to be discussed as well, and I agree with Mr. Ventura, and I think that living in this neighborhood myself, I think that there's probably a little more we need to talk about with this deal before we go further. So I'm gonna make a motion to table it. Scott.
Okay, we have a motion to table. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and second, and now we can have some discussion.
So my concern, living not far from this, is it's already a heavy traffic area based on what's going on down there. In my opinion, there's more traffic than what the roads can handle. It's an agricultural area. The roads are township, and this particular road is a county road that I have a farm along, and I know that it gets used extremely heavily. So anything that would increase the traffic in this area concerns me, and I think most of the people that would live down there. Now, today, maybe it's not gonna increase it, but here's something that concerns me, is that these are two different plats. So if we were to approve the rezone of this plat, today it's part of Dakota Steel, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be going forward, right? And so it could become a separate industrial, commercial type business that could increase the traffic twofold, tenfold, whatever. Once we make that decision, we have no control. And, same with the residential spots on the front and across the road and across the road to the north. I understand that the Decker family owns all those today, but 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, I mean, these are decisions we're making that are gonna stick, and maybe their family isn't gonna live there in all those places, going forward, and then we've kinda shoehorned a industrial area into a residential agricultural area, and that concerns me. We've been down this road a couple times, in the past few months. I feel, even more strongly today than I have in the past, as I've thought about it more and more, and then you read our comprehensive plan for Lincoln County, and it wants to concentrate these types of zonings, along our interstate, around our exits, and in our municipalities, as Commissioner Poppins has pointed out, that our municipalities are geared up and ready to handle this type of stuff. I can tell you, being on a township board, that the townships in southern Lincoln County anyway, are not funded or prepared enough to handle, industrial development. So those are my concerns, those are my thoughts, and I guess I'm hoping that, we take some time, think about those, and we'll come back and revisit it here maybe next month.
Thank you very much. Other commissioners, other thoughts?
I just echo what he says. We just need to take our time, and it is, I mean, we do have rules for a reason, and why there is obviously I wasn't on the board when this initially happened, so why there's an industrial area right smack dab in the middle there is confusing to me, and why it would continue to grow, so.
And, yeah, I agree too. We gotta watch our funding on our roads very carefully now in Lincoln County, and this is something to think about. So, all right, with that, any other discussion? I'll take roll call. Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
let me clarify, this is
To
to table the item. Mr.
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Poppins?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Enston?
Yes.
And I am a yes also. We'll table this for the next meeting. All right, Mr. Brown.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. This next application is a conditional use permit application from Ron Peterson. This is an application for motor vehicle sales on the subject property. This is the property that's been identified. Property is currently zoned I-1 light industrial. The property consists of essentially a contractor shop warehouse that's built on the property. That was the conditional use. There is no additional conditional use permits on this property. The applicant is requesting that a unit within that building, unit number 4, be utilized for car sales or motor vehicle sales. And the application materials, the applicant identified that there would be really no vehicles outside of the structure, that all the vehicles for sale would be within the structure. And then there is, as you can see from the previous aerial, there is some screened storage in the back of the structure that would also be utilized. There is identified enough parking on the property. And so staff, I'll go back to the staff report once. Staff is recommending approval of this application, subject to the 7 conditions that were outlined in the staff report. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, any questions for staff? I am seeing none. All right, and this time I'll ask the applicant to come forward and speak on their application.
Ron Peterson, 27050 Sunset Boulevard, unit number 4 and T. Conditional use permit for basically vehicle sales. It is pretty much what he described. Nothing outdoors at the frontage of the property. Everything's gonna be indoors, mainly classics and some late model vehicles. That's about it.
All right, commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
So did I hear that there's nothing outside, everything's inside?
Yeah, I'm not gonna have a frontage set up with vehicles with signs on them at all.
Okay.
Because of the nature of the cars, they'd be indoors, and then behind the property, there was a 50 by 50 designated area for me that's fenced in. If I have late models, they'd be kept outside and back. So it's not appropriate for having vehicles setting out front, and that's why I would be keeping them inside. There's an office and everything there that I'd work out of.
All right,
Nice.
commissioners, any further questions?
Sorry. I assume you are aware of all the conditions, the 7 conditions in your,
Yep,
Okay,
very easy to follow. Yep, I
Okay.
read through them, no problem at all.
All right, will there be any repair of
Zero.
vehicles or?
That's all done off-site. I don't do anything on-site at all. So basically, the reconditioning is done elsewhere, and then when they're completed, I bring them there
Will they be delivered by semi, by trailer, by?
by me.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
would you agree to the condition of actually stating that you would have no outside vehicles other than, because right now it does not include that in the 7 conditions?
Well, like I say, in the back of the
Yeah,
property,
it'd
that
be in
is
the back,
outside.
But out in the front?
I will have nothing displayed
Would
for
you-
sale out front, no.
Would you be willing to add that
I-
if the board asked?
I
for
would
that?
be fine with that. I mean, I can't say if somebody's coming to look at a vehicle, I
No,
wouldn't have
I'm
them
not-
waiting
I'm
for them. But no,
Yep, okay.
yep, I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I will ask anybody in favor of the application to come forward and speak. All right, with that, I will ask anybody in opposition to come forward and speak. Okay, seeing none, I will close the floor to public comment and ask for a motion from the commission.
I'll make a motion to approve the application with the 7 conditions.
And the added 8th one?
Yes, and we can add that 8th one, that there will be no vehicles for sale out front.
I don't know that we need it. I was just asking if he'd be willing to, but can definitely include it in the motion. And I'll second that for discussion. So,
All right, we have a motion second with the 7 conditions plus the added one of no storage outside or no
No
sales out
sales.
front.
Out front, yeah.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, I will do roll call. Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes,
Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
and Commissioner Jungling is also a yes. Congratulations. All right, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This next application is an application from Platinum Properties. This is an application to transfer building eligibility from one parcel to an adjoining parcel. Both parcels are contiguous and under the same ownership. And you can't see it on here, but we were supplied with a deed that essentially establishes a property here that contains an eligibility that was bought from this landowner here. So the application is in conformance with the requirements for a conditional use permit to be contiguous under the same ownership. The applicant is intending to transfer this eligibility into this property that they own and will then develop it or build a single-family dwelling on the subject property. Again, this is an allowable conditional use in the A1 agricultural district. Again, the only requirement is to be contiguous and under the same ownership, which staff has documented that the application is in conformance with those requirements. So staff does recommend approval of this application, subject to 2 conditions of approval. The first being that essentially we're defining that it is a transfer from a portion of that parcel to the parcel where the intended building will be built upon, or the residential structure will be built. And then the second item is a requirement in the A1 agricultural district that when person obtains a building permit for a single-family dwelling, that they file a right to farm covenant. And so there is a stipulation, if you've had a chance to read it, within the A1 agricultural district that talks about what typically is encountered as potential nuisances within the A1 agricultural district. And so this is just a requirement that we're adding onto this, that be filed prior to a building permit. And we do, if you've noticed in the past, a few eligibility transfers that we've done, we have added this as a standard stipulation to that requirement. So with that, we'd have to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, any questions for staff? All right, seeing none, I will ask the applicant to come forward and speak on the proposal.
My name is Corey Davis. I'm representing Platinum Properties. Our office address is 27210 Huck Finn Circle in Harrisburg. And yeah, just simply looking to move the eligibility from the acre parcel that's on the far side of basically a half-mile in from the road. And rather than having to do an excessive driveway, it seemed more important to get it moved into that other parcel and so we can build it closer to the road.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Commissioners, any questions for Corey?
Can you show on the map where the parcels, is that okay for me now?
Nope, no, you address the commission. We'll ask Corey. So, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, is there anybody in favor of the applicant? Okay, is there anybody in opposition of the application? Yeah, if you have a question, you can.
So, can you show, like,
Oh,
so where
will you
is it
come-
coming
please.
from exactly?
Will you please come to the podium and give your name?
Ryan Abel, 26946 464th Ave, T, South Dakota 57064.
Thank you, Ryan.
So where is it coming from exactly there? And where are you planning to put it to? So that's off of the section, technically. Right, because we've got the 4 quarters, so that's a section over,
Yeah, and as long as they own,
are adjoining.
yep, they're adjoining.
All right. So I'm supposed to, yeah, I mean,
I'm a little confused too.
so, yeah, I bought the property, wow, here. Can you see where I'm pointing? Yeah, no, one down, yeah. And when I bought the property, well, all that land wasn't owned together, I do not believe. I believe just this, you owned,
I own all of it, that's outlined in blue.
and you have for the duration of the, like, the last couple of years?
Yeah, yeah, that's the 36 acres there, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, that, because the property you live in.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, if he is gonna, he needs to
Yeah. no,
use the,
it's-
if he gonna speak and need to use the mic.
I need,
Yeah, Ryan, if you have any questions, you can ask us and then we'll
sure,
bring up
sure,
other
sure,
people and
sure.
answer for you.
okay, so anyway, yeah, when I bought the property, I was under the impression that we'd used all the eligibilities, that I was buying into a property where things weren't gonna be changing. It's one of the reasons we moved into the area, depending on where things are being built and what the real plans for the property are. I mean, it would take away from what I thought I was buying into at the time, and I did look into, whether, at least in that quarter, whether we utilized all those housing eligibilities and things like that. So, it was an effort of me and my family to have some of that space and have things be a certain way. And I just hate to see that go away, if that makes any sense.
Understood. So, thank you, Ryan.
Mr. Chairman, if I could for him.
Yeah, Mr.
Could I,
Powers.
do you fully understand the parameters for moving eligibilities when it's owned by?
With the contiguous properties and things,
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, so that could, at the time you bought it, was one of our conditions or allowable conditional uses for moving properties at that time, so.
Right, and I understand that. I didn't think there were any eligibilities that were contiguous that could have been moved through, and I knew that they were used in that area, so I guess I could have done a little bit more research, but yeah, I mean, I'd personally prefer not to see that happen in our area, especially if I don't know exactly how it's gonna be utilized. Because at this point in time, it's just move the eligibility. What happens back there and exactly where it ends up is not defined at the moment. Does that make sense?
But if I may again, Mr. Chairman, for clarification, we actually as commission had encouraged moving of eligibilities to concentrate them into areas so we didn't have them sporadically throughout the quarter sections if possible because of the utilization of roads and things like that. Because inside 40 acres of quarter, highly unusable kind of a situation. So the purpose of that was to actually encourage moving of eligibilities and concentrating them into a more centralized or centralized area. So it is actually is one of the purposes of being able to move the eligibility.
I understand that, but it's the eligibility on the other side of the other road. It's not,
Yeah, it's-
right, there's a nice road there that's just as well taken care of as the road that I live on. And it's coming from the other side of that road.
I'm just helping you understand
no,
what the
yeah, no,
purpose of the,
I understand, but
Okay.
again, it's not in, yeah, it's across the street of, not in. So that's just, yeah.
okay,
Oh, Mr. Chairman?
yes.
I'll clarify that. The map threw me for a loop on this, but essentially this map, we were showing the notification that we did. The eligibility is actually, they own an acre here, essentially right where that, and I'm blind right now, but I think it's a 100, it says right there. Essentially, the eligibility is right here, and it's being transferred to this property and will be built, I believe, right about there. So it's not over here. This parcel is where the eligibility exists that was put to this piece here, and now he's transferring it to here.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Toby. That helps quite a bit.
I gave
All right.
more land than he had, so, which does not happen, so, yeah.
Okay, anybody else in opposition of the application?
I don't know if I'm against it as much as I just want to make a few comments on it.
Sure. Could
I
you
own
give-
that other 10-acre
Could
parcel.
you give your name and,
Chris Gessling, 26942 464th Avenue, T.
thank you, Chris.
So anyways, my drainage runs through that. I'm more worried about my drainage. Also, I have privacy concerns. I'd like to see some trees planted on my north side or his south side. The house is gonna be closer to my house than anybody else's, so.
And
I don't, well, the eligibility must have got moved from somewhere else also, because there's already 4 on that quarter also. Or houses already.
sure, it might have been sometime in the past. I'm
I
not sure.
understand trying to put them all in one quarter, but like I say, we bought the land assuming there was only 4 there, so.
Yep. And this, today, we're looking at just moving eligibility as far as houses and layouts and all that. That's really not on the table today. Today's just moving house eligibility is what we have to make a decision on.
Gotcha. All right. So when does that come up where I can state what I need?
It'll be up to the owner to make application sometime in the future.
So if he makes an application to build a house there, then I have to come back here and,
You can request right now to the
think that's
commission
what I'm trying to
that we put conditions onto this
That's
if
what
it's
I'm trying to
passed.
do.
Yeah, and if you have a request, you put it forward to us and we may or may not put it in the conditions.
rows of trees go on the south side of the property next to mine. And I also request that nothing gets built through my drainage or gets blocked. Otherwise, it'll back water up into my property and kill my trees. I doubt anybody would build land way back on the back side of that since it's a big swamp through there, but.
So the pond,
You go up there and,
no, you're fine right where you're at. I can see it on my map. So where that pond is, basically that drains to the northeast,
yes, sir.
to the next
Right
pond.
back behind Chavaneu's property to that
Okay.
other pond, back over to Nancy's property.
Yep.
and out.
Yeah, I can see where that would be a problem if
All
that got
that
plugged
land
up.
on the back side, the east side of that drains in, and it actually pushes back into my pond and floods my trees.
Mhm.
Because of, actually the CRP, when they made it CRP, it slowed down the water flow so much. So I've lived with them.
Well, I'm familiar,
Any worse. is
I'm
all
familiar with that part of the world, and it's, yeah, it's wet. So. So are you, aren't you?
I don't know that the building of a house actually is gonna interfere more or less. I mean, if someone wanted to or didn't want to block drainage, that's probably not going to get affected by this in particular. The right for somebody to block drainage isn't anymore by having the right to build a house. So, that probably is not pertinent to this situation. If you've got an issue with drainage not happening, the best way is always to talk to neighbors. Usually it's a matter of, you know, over a handshake trying to figure out something, how to improve it. But by granting,
I agree with, but I've had a problem with a neighbor that wasn't so nice.
it does happen, and then unfortunately, that's what the court systems.
None of them
Yeah.
are here.
But the point being is, it's not the civil kind of a situation for us on drainage on this. But I don't know if there's a condition that they want to place on the board. We're trying to make sure that that doesn't happen, possibly if it is an issue, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, anybody else in opposition of the application? Okay, seeing none, I will close the floor to public input, and I'll ask for a motion from the commission.
I'll move to approve it. Again, I believe the rest of that, as far as drainage and stuff, is a civil matter. It's part of our standard procedures. It has met our planning and zoning office requirements, so I would move to approve.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion and second. Commissioners, any discussion?
I have a question. It was brought up, Toby, how is there 5 housing eligibilities on that quarter? You know?
Lots of record.
What's that?
They were platted prior to density zoning.
Okay,
I don't know if all of them were, but that's,
got it.
I can show you lots of that kind of stuff up my neck of the woods.
I bet. Yep.
Other commissioners, questions, discussion? All right, yeah, the only thing I have to say is always encourage neighbors to talk to each other, reach out to each other and have full communication, talk about, you know, hey, if you do this, this might affect me this way, you know, just have a good open conversation, and that's always the best way to handle stuff like this before it gets too bad and people don't like who they live next to, and that just ends up bad for a long time. So with that, we have a motion and a second to approve. I'll do a roll call. Mr. Scott?
I'm gonna abstain.
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan?
Yes.
Commissioner Ensted?
Yes.
And Commissioner Jungling is also a yes. All right, Mr. Brown?
Communication is always a good thing.
okay. This next application is an application from Travis Hofer. This is an application to allow a manufactured home on the subject property. Subject property, as you can see on the screen, this is approximately, I believe, 3 miles south of the city of Lenox. Subject parcel is vacant. Subject parcel is zoned A1 agricultural, as is all of the surrounding area. There is a number of platted lots that have been developed and are left undeveloped on the west side of the road. There is a house that's developed to the south of the subject property, and then there is a vacant lot that will eventually have a single-family dwelling on it. Property to the north, if you recall, this is the Kirsten property, which we recently rezoned to a planned development, rezoned to a planned development for this property here. So there is requirements within the zoning regulations for placement of a manufactured home in the A1 agricultural district by a conditional use permit. The structure has to be essentially newer than 1976. It has to be essentially a double wide. And then the third primarily criteria is that it has to be anchored to the ground or permanently affixed. And we accomplish this through piers, is probably the more common route to do it. So staff did review the application, have discussions with the applicant. The applicant notified staff that the structure currently exists within the city of Lenox, that he is the current owner of that structure, that the proposal would be to move that structure to this property. I think the last discussion that I did have with him is that they were kind of still going back and forth that they may eventually build a house on the property, or they might do that instead of this option. So we did continue this application. Staff does recommend approval of this for the placement of the manufactured home on this property, subject to the 3 conditions that were outlined in the staff report. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
I do have a question, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. When's the last time we had an application such as this?
I believe last year we had one. if I'm
We did?
correct in that. Yeah, it's not very frequent that we have this.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the commission?
I'll throw one last thing in there. So, a single-family dwelling is permitted in the A1 agricultural district. The differentiation between a manufactured home and a stick-built home is code. And so typically, a single-family dwelling would be built to the International Residential Code, which the county has adopted, and that's the 2018 version, is the current version that the county has adopted. This particular structure, by definition, is a manufactured home because it's built to HUD standards. And so the placement of a sticker is somewhere on the chassis or somewhere in the electrical box. But it's a different type of construction requirement that was used to build this structure. That's the main differentiation on it. Modular homes, which are built in Madison and other locations, are not manufactured homes. Those are essentially stick-built homes for purposes of building code. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Couple questions I had. Everything on the west side of the road there, is that still zone ag on those, or just plotted out but zoned ag yet?
Correct.
And does this property have the housing eligibility?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, commissioners, any further questions? Seeing none, I'll ask the applicant to come forward and talk about their application.
Travis Ho for Lenox, South Dakota. He basically told you what we want to do. Move my trailer house to that property there. Probably in the
Nice.
future, build a house maybe there.
Okay.
That's about it.
All right. Commissioners, any questions for Travis?
Obviously, Toby, you wouldn't let this move forward if the trailer was older than the 1977 or whatever and wasn't a double wide, correct?
Correct.
It's an 02,
Okay.
2002.
All right. Here, no further questions. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I will ask anybody in favor of the application come forward and speak. All right, I will ask anybody in opposition of the application come forward and speak. All right, seeing none, I'll close the floor to public comment, and I'll ask for a motion from the commission.
I'll make a motion to approve. Scott?
Second, instead.
All right, and I assume these are with the three conditions? that
With
laid out by
conditions,
staff?
correct.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, commission? Okay, here none, no discussion. I'll ask for a roll call. Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins?
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Anstead,
Yes.
and Commissioner Jungling is also a yes. Good luck in your new place. All right, with that, that ends our public hearings. Any new business, Mr. Brown?
No new business, Mr. Chairman. Would notify the board, though, that you will have a joint planning commission meeting next month. So it'll be your second Wednesday of the month. We do have two conditional use permit applications, essentially a transfer of the building eligibility. Same owner, but across two separate sets of property. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
All right. With that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Scott?
I'll second, instead.
All right, we have motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're closed. Thank you.